with one of my ex-girlfriends of 10 years before that was moving back down to Atlanta. So we rolled out. When I got back to Atlanta, they turned on the TV, they said there's a possible connection in Atlanta. So now this sister's a spiritual seer, she can see and she can pick up. And she said, oh, they're talking about you. So the next day, she called on the phone. They waited for me to get on the phone. She called on the phone and she said, I'm getting ready to move in this apartment. Can you help me move? I said, well, yes. She said, I'll be back at 1. So when she came at 1, we were sitting on the front porch, and 25 or 30 police cars rolled in. 2 big, huge vans, 2 or 3 helicopters. I mean, the entire street was lit up with police cars. And she said, well, they're looking for you. And we were on the front porch and they couldn't see us. And it got embarrassing because they were looking. I don't think they could even see the house because it was closed. So they couldn't even see us, and I was on the front porch and stuff, you know. And she said, they're looking for us and all. And the neighbors were like, what the hell is going on? And so they realized the embarrassing situation. They had all this. It was about 30 police cars and helicopters and all this. And when they couldn't see the house or me, we were standing out on the front porch. They sped off like they were still looking for people. About 3 months later, on December 19th, they tried to hit again and got the wrong street. You see what I'm saying? So this is nothing new. Marie Laveau down in New Orleans, when they used to come to arrest her, they couldn't find the building. You know, they couldn't find the building. But we're not even just talking about things on a grandiose level like that. I had a girl, they came to cut off her electricity last. She couldn't find the pump. Couldn't find the meter. You know? And it's right in front of the house. So we're talking about dealing with the type of magical energies and the systems that are now in place, because the simple fact, all of this particular, the earth is dissipating, and more of that is stronger now than what you have been led to believe. What you have been led to believe. So we have to, and so it's not unlike the brother was talking about changing your mind and changing your thinking and all that. But and he talks about the numerical system, geometry, and the whole 9 yards. And I studied that, and he is right as far as a systematic numerical breakdown of the way things are in the energies in the universe. Well, it's the same thing. Now they had Tony Brown. I'm gonna put a slidation first before I go into this stuff. Let me just quote to these particular ones and give them some rum and stuff, which is something that you should be doing. Everyone should have some type of spiritual altar or something in your house dedicated to a certain amount of energies. You don't see no indigenous people on the planet that don't have some type of, even the Asians got an altar in the house. You know what I'm saying? So when they can keep you from your base of power with all your religios, you see what I'm saying? And therefore, they understand. So the first thing you say is, I got God on my side. Then they can go, we can go ahead and shoot this nigga in the head. Because you don't understand the principalities of a certain system that you line up under. If you're just thinking that it's something that you just throw caution to the wind and say, God, you know what I'm saying? And they know you're ignorant. And then they can go in and kill you. So most indigenous people deal, like the brother was saying about spirituality versus religion. There's a good movie that's now on video, just came out, The Last Samurai. The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise. And they captured him, and he was living amongst the Japanese. And he said, you know, I'm not a religious man, but why do I think that everything that is going on around me in everyday life in this particular community that I'm living in is spiritual? From the time they get up in the morning and they weave in baskets, or they're playing with the swords and all that, it's all spiritual. And he didn't even become a samurai warrior to come close to that until he had to slow down time. So we know that religion has very little to do, or if nothing to do with spirituality. As a matter of fact, most true things in spirituality you would call evil. We want to get into some of that tonight also too, so you can permeate through. Because the part that you have been taught, all of the evil stuff, is the neglected half of your spiritual self. So all the things that you thinking is evil and you righteous from is the neglected half of your true essence. And this is what we have to break through at this particular time. So let me pull a libation, let me spit them some rum. And we want to quote at least these Congo rights. You know the word ashe, which also means amen, it also means power. So be it, so and so on. Zarabanda.
Ashe.
Ashe. El Cristo Negro.
Ashe.
Ashe. El Cristo Rey.
Ashe.
Mama Shola.
Ashe.
Los Santísima Muerte.
Ashe.
Los Santísima Pifiki.
Ashe.
San Simon.
Ashe.
Las Scriptures and Tranquillas.
Ashe.
Marte de la Luna.
Ashe.
Marte de Agua.
Ashe.
Francisco Siete Reyes.
Ashe.
I'm going to deal with those, and I want to deal with these seven entities that came through because we tapped into certain things about a year ago. Ishtar, Monu, Noku, Mana, Imatu, Titi, Jilpa, few other ones, which is the level of time course, and I'll explain what this is. Labido, Luigi, Atama, Okawadi, Hoa, Leoa, Rotuga, Godiva, Toba, Okawadi, Biwasta, Amati, Abudige, Fumo, Oticha, Tiacha, Sheoba, Shuma, Ogumu, Babylonia, Alcala, Nokeo, Katumba, La Villa, Awalensi, Fumo, Exantes, Castillo, Nisaba, Alpilokea, Bazuzu, Numerous, Lucifer, everybody's scared of that. Draco, Netu, Metsu, Mitu, Yohalo, Pele, Ayo, Emelech, Drakon, Notorio, Aya, Amos, Omas, Amas, Lectas, Aset, Osa, Heru, Camophis, Sebek, Sashet, Setex, Newt, Hack, Robert Hewitt, Apel, Apophis, Apple, Tyre, Ishtar, Kengu, Ashe. So we're going to deal with that at this particular time. We're going to go into some of that in a few minutes. But I was going to say this because at Tony Brown Journal, if it still comes on up here, they had him on the other night, and he was trying to say that Martin Luther King had a greater vision, that he was so upset at the Detroit, Michigan march in, I think it's in 1962, and he interpreted his vision, and his vision was that there was hardly any difference between black and white in the particular aspect when he talks about skin color. It was only something like 9 cells separating black and white based on skin color. And he got his particular information out of his particular magazine, Scientific America. Anyway, what it is, his conclusion was coming based on the synopsis of white scholarship the last 5 years to try to debunk the whole melanin concept. Yet when you get Russell J. Reeder's book, Melatonin, your Body's Own Wonder Drug, and it's interesting that they will have almost 100 pages of bibliography and 300 labs researching this particular melanin research for the last 30 doggone years. So if there is no difference but 9 cells or whatever this thing, when it comes to skin color, which could be right, that's your melanocytes, and I will explain that within a few minutes, which is right when they talk about that. See what it is, when they deal with science, they will give you half of it to fool you and to give you an example. But why would it take 30 years and almost 300 labs, and the most researched stuff on the planet is melanin research, if it was only based on 9 cells of melanocytes? Well, they gave half the story. Number one, we found even other great information. Your melanocytes, or the melanin in your skin, is just based on the pigmentation in your relationship to the sun. But when the most of the melanin research that is dealing with the chakra systems in the pineal gland, and mainly in the root chakra, in the gastrointestinal tract, and throughout the cells of the body, is in the melanin. And it has nothing to do with melanocytes. You can be light as hell. You can take the lightest person in here. As a matter of fact, you can take one of the lightest people in this room, and based on the inner melanin on the inside, it will be even stronger than an African born on the continent. Now, why do you say that? They talk about, and the Jews know this, or the Israelis know this, or something called the Great Mixing Bowl in the West, or the Mixing Bowl of the Shekinah, where they talk about people that will have various nations, or what they call different tribes, various nations in them. And this is the basis of masonry, of the basis of alchemy, which would be the finished product of various ancient nations where it would come all into one composite of one human being. Those particular people are the people that's in the Western Hemisphere, because the simple fact is this. We know that when they first, in the first remnant of the slave trade, they dropped mainly in the Caribbean. And the Caribbean, they dropped the first aspects of the slaves. They had big boats, so you could count 2 droves of maybe, let's say, Igbo Hausa or Angola or whatever that particular thing. It would be 2 droves. Whereas in America, they broke them down into smaller lots and mixed them all up. So in so many words, like one guy said, when you study in his book, Milo Begard's book, Secret of Voodoo, which was done in the 1950s and it was later on published by Open Court Books, which was the people, the City Lights Books, which is the homosexual group out of San Francisco, who fought to get a lot of that particular literature published. And years later, after the City Lights book became a bigger corporation, they started publishing all types of rare books. Well, the book, Milo Begard books, talks about 15 different African indigenous tribes, or African indigenous nations that came into fashioning voodoo, based on the particular people where they put all this together and fashioning voodoo. Well, that was in 1950 something, in the late 50s when this book came out. The other book by Reginald Crosby, Vodun, a Voodoo Quantum Leap, that came out in 2000. It was already up to 25 different nations, including East Africa, because the reports coming from Atlanta University, African American Studies Department in 1988, was they went all the way even into Ethiopia. We got records of slavery, but based on the slave trade. You see what I'm saying? So, based on that, by 2000, they had reported that the system of just voodoo alone had over 25 different African nations within it. Thus, it is somehow trying to chronicle the blood system in the slaves in the Western Hemisphere, period. In so many words, they say we have so many composites of the African nations or the African tribes in our blood system, so that it makes a certain type of created melanin. And we're talking about alchemy here. We're talking about alchemy here, which is the highest form of the mystery systems. So we're talking about, why is it that we are such a created people? Why is it that there's, you know what I'm saying, as far as there was a new type of product that came out of slavery in the whole Western Hemisphere? When we talk about the islands and all of that, has something to do with all of this stupid. So in so many words, what I'm trying to say here is, they have studied this for the last 50 years in the melanin research, because we're talking about Yale University, which is the first people to call it melanin. Before it was called melanin, it was called occultism. The whole book on that, The Black Sun, Peter Moon's book. Get that book, The Black Sun by Peter Moon. It was called occultism. And he has a whole book on it and stuff. The only thing they got to do is just say, I say melanin. And you understand, you say, what is this occultism? So they had a whole summit in World War II. And half of the research that came out of Nazi Germany and the concentration camps, remember now, part of the people who was in the so-called concentration camp was the gypsies. You know what I'm saying? And they just tell you that, they didn't tell you if it was a whole West African thing going on, it could have been a whole North African thing going on. We don't know what type of people. We do know that half of Stalin's killing, when Stalin killed millions of people, most of that was ethnic cleansing from the black part of Russia. Well, if they didn't have black Russians, why would they say black Russians in the name of this famous drink? Why is Beethoven called the Moor of Russia? You know, they said the Moor of Europe, they said that nature knows no color line. The point I'm trying to make here is, they call it occultism. So the whole book on occultism, 1997, Peter Moon put the book out, which is the basis. He said, well, what is all this about? He said the basis of these secret societies is to ingest the occultism, which is ingesting knowledge. And he talks about how you have your obscene rites. And your obscene rites is a ritual practice where they swallow live pineal glands. Well, you can get the movie Fear Loathing in Las Vegas. And at the end of the movie, he was going for the ultimate high. And they had every drug known to man. But whenever he swallowed that pituitary gland, which pituitary gland, regulates the melanin production that goes to the pineal gland, they don't tell you pituitary because they don't want to say pineal because they know that the third eye research is real popular in at least the last 12, 13 years when it comes to black people. So it became the pituitary gland. And then when he swallowed that pineal gland, he went on the ultimate high. Well, the epilogue of Peter Moon's book talks about the obscene rites, and the obscene rites is where they swallow live pineal glands. It's called the oregano effect. And there was a movie that was banned in America. One of the last of Christopher Lee's, Christopher Lee was your Dracula from the 1960s. That's what we was getting down with Dracula, was Christopher Lee. Well, his last one was called The Satanic Rites of Dracula. It was banned in America, but now it's on video. And in there they talk about the obscene rites. So, we're talking about melanin research, so when Mussolini comes with this foolishness about, there's only 9 cells that separate us, with the Nag Hammadi library, which is dug up out of Egypt in 1945, say that the counterfeit spirits are separated from their true beings by a single essence. They're talking about that particular melanin research, but they're talking about inner melanin research. Now this is talking about the whole African family, don't get me wrong. It's talking about the whole African family, but the key here is if they can keep you from your magic. Now I'm not talking about magic in the way you have been taught, because you thinking magic is David Copperfield, or Peter Jennings, or something fully radical. Those are tricks. They took an ancient word magic, which is a science of manipulating the physical laws of the universe to get what you want, or to get a new paradigm. And they took an ancient word, which was science, and later on applied it to modern tricks. You think now, psychologically, when I say magic, it's some tricks. It's pull a rabbit out of hat. Swallowing a sword or something like that. We're not talking about that. We're talking about ancient science. Now, mind you, me, it's interesting here because when I go into this particular information, why is it that every major university, that you can go to every major university, University of Berkeley, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, University of Virginia, and they have major studies. These white folks are studying this stuff around the clock. You see what I'm saying? But yet we call ourselves educated. You know what I'm saying? And I went to college for 8 years and didn't learn jack shit. And I'll challenge anybody up here says that you got an education based on going to college. You got training. And even like Gandhi said, Western education, oh, that would be a good idea if we could find such a thing. I've done a whole research study on the atrophied brain and the atrophied mind and the savagery of black people, and I didn't do it in the projects. I did it right there at Clark Atlanta University in the graduate department of some of the sickest human beings in the world. Because Western education is designed, like my man said over here, is designed to elevate the European.
Right.
The European says that he only uses 10% of his brain. You've heard this before. And you keep thinking, oh, we only use 10% of our brain. You know what I'm saying? They give us these diagnoses, and it's for them, and we think it's for us. He uses 10% of his brain, so that means if his knowledge or his training is based on 10% of the brain, that means you are born with 10% of the brain shut down because you live in a society that only gives you 10% function of the brain. know, he said, oh yeah, oh, the average male, he reaches his sexual peak at 19.
I don't know about that.
And we know that. No, that's the European man reaches his sexual peak at 19. Why the hell you think the white woman is running after your man? You know? Running after your man. So now, it's interesting because I said in a lecture back in 93, no, back in 95, I said in a lecture, I said there's certain rhythms within rhythms sexually that when we have sex, it's normal to us because it's our normal way. But to the Europeans, it's on a higher level. Now let me explain what I'm talking about. There's rhythms within rhythms. And although it's normal to you just bumping and grinding, it's something else on a whole other level to the European. So, one of my boys took this particular information, was getting off my table. He asked the white girl, he said, because she got a little black boyfriend. He said, well, what's the difference between the black man and the white man? And she said, well, I don't know what it is. She said, it's got something to do with the rhythms. There's certain things I can feel with him that I can't feel with the white boy. Now, what do we mean by that? All you got to do is look at the average Soul Train line. Yes, Europeans can take your dance and they can choreograph with choreography. They can choreograph that dance and they can look pretty good at it. But when you look at the black person, it's not the general dance, it's the moves in between the moves. You don't see whether you got the same dance, but the next thing you know, some nigga done embellished the point because he done have like 4 or 5 moves in between the general moves.
That rhythm.
You know, that is called chaos. That is the rhythm of the universe of a primordial aspect of chaos because melanin is chaos. It never stops moving. And so therefore, when you try to choreograph it or try to write it down, you kill it. Like one brother said, I played jazz from the mid-60s to 1985. And he said, I fucked up when I went to school to learn jazz. He said, now, you can't get me to pick up a horn. And I said, you know that is interesting? I said, I was one of the greatest artists. I was one of the best artists in the state of South Carolina. And I said, they said, well, why you gonna do what? I said, I went to college in the store. It turned me against it. And he said, I know you can't write down certain things that's spiritual. You see, certain things are spiritual. It's like Woodmont. No matter how much he brags on the classical stuff, somehow it just don't sound right because he's imitating the masters, and they did it. And although you were doing it, it's like you boxed it in and you made it a discipline, so therefore you killed it. You talk about improvisation. You see what I'm saying? So you talk about years later, you still doing some stuff that's already been done. The mystery to melanin and the magic to the magic and the mysteries to our particular science is creating a new. What they call chaos means everything must change. Change is supreme. And when you box it in and structure it, it dies. That's why your religion, that's why your orthodoxy and everything you do dies. You see, because you box it in. So therefore, we're stuck in old molded out stuff. Outmoded stuff that don't work. Because we have boxed in the chaos, the nothingness, the no thing. It's called Ayin Sora Buddha, Ayin Sora in the Kabbalah, which is found in the temple walls of Temple of Dendera, Heru of Dendera in Kenya. Another thing. And this plagued me when I was studying their history. Why could we not find the massive monuments and temples that we find all of Nile Valley throughout West Africa? This is linking in what the brother was saying. Okay, you have monuments in West Africa, but the massive monuments of those temples, and remember now, they covered over 200 temples under the Aswan Dam for a reason. 200 temples. years ago. I said, what? Why do we don't have these great monuments in West Africa? It wasn't until I tapped into the spiritual aspect of what I'm dealing with to find out what's going on, and that is this. And I can tell you go to some books that can also document this. Those temples that we have in Kemet is nothing but record monuments and libraries that came into existence to put down a record on papyruses, the monumental walls, and everything that they could write on, because we were losing memory. And we would need those records and things of things that were spiritual and things based on scientific, because they knew that we were going into a state of drunkenness. Now, let me explain. So I said, okay, this makes sense. Now I asked the question, why was it not in West Africa? Then it understands something. The ancient Africans, all of them, had what is called, when we're not talking about 2,000, 3,000 years ago. We're talking about when the Nephil sisters say we had 10,000 years of history in Egypt alone. They said, well, who used to live before them? He said, that's when a whole bunch of gods used to rule. Those gods that used to rule was nothing but us. Now, what it meant was that the reason why you don't see it in West Africa is because in our minds, all of us, we have detailed files. You ever see the Terminator say I have detailed files. So every African that was born had a detailed file record, which you now know is called Akashic records, or the Akashic records. That was our memory bank that we came to the planet when everybody shared detailed files, and one mental telepathy path where this particular wide body of knowledge, like the brother said, I just tap in, which we still can do. That wide body of knowledge is there and essential to every original person. Then the vibratory rate started slowing down, and we became more and more encased into the physical aspect of the world, and the senses of those spiritual systems shut down to just your 5 senses. But prior to that, we had detailed files in multiple disciplines and multiple complex of records. So the coming of monumental Egypt was simply to record what was in the Akashic records before we lost our memory. And now we are like regular humans. And when I say regular humans, I'm talking about hybrid, immigrant humans. You see what I'm saying? So we had a time where, and we know this is true because your African real is nothing but a simulation. He is proof, living proof. And he can give you what? 300, 400, 500 years of history. You see what I'm saying? And they would set him down. So this is proof, and he's only a remnant of what all of the Africans had. So the reason why you don't see the West Africans with all those buildings, they didn't need those monuments because those monuments were only there to record history. Hell, they were living history. You see what I'm saying? So now, dealing with this particular concept, what we're saying here is, they say that the time and the influences that influence those particular times. So when they talk about Atlantis and Lemuria, even Alistair Crowley got one little book that they don't put on the market. And the reason why they don't put it on the market because the first page tells you in the book that the word Atlantis, when they break it down based on its Latin root, it means the black woman. So when they talk about Atlantis, Lemuria, they're just talking about the primordial time before what they call recorded history, or what the white boy calls, he calls it prehistory. Now how the hell, that's an oxymoron. How can you have prehistory? You see what I'm saying? You have prehistory. Now they got this new term up, pre-Christianity. Nobody heard this thing before, pre-Christianity? That's because they found a whole other form of Christianity in Hemmitt with the Nine Commodity Library dug up in 1945, and the Nine Commodity Library in Hemmitt, a whole form of Christianity, and they knew that the other one was nothing but plagiarized from these particular Gnostics. And so therefore they got to come up with pre-Christianity. That's what, I mean, what is that? So y'all all right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So dealing with this particular information, they understand that in us, they have isolated the messianic plateau, which means the messianic plateau is not no one man running around in no fucking sandals, use the expression. No one man running around in no sandals, and you gotta follow this one man. The messianic thing is a system, is nothing but your soul. Let's break this down right now. The Christians will say, well, Christ is Greek, Christos. Well, first of all, we don't want to ask you this question. Why you gotta use the Greek terminology? What's the so-called Christian terminology? So let you know right there, you're talking about something that is a composite of several systems. You see, because they can't even trace their origin. But they'll say it's Greek for Christo. But let's break this particular mystery down, because we're talking about the mystery of alchemy. The Christ is nothing but the human soul. Listen, wipe this out, because you taking, you see, if they can keep you to taking your energy and putting it on some type of entity or some type of deity outside of yourself, then they know that you will never reach your true possibility, probability, and potentiality.
Mm-hmm.
The Christ is nothing but when your soul rises up the chakra system, rests in the heart chakra, and on into the pineal gland, and into what is called the pearly gates of Zion, which is pineal, pituitary, and thalamus,
Hypothalamus,
region of the brain. That when your soul goes to that particular level, it is called the Christ. It's Christos, crystallized. They got a crystallized Christos. And it's nothing but the coming of the third eye of the ultimate reality of your soul when it grows up. They say man is but a child waiting to become an adult. So the whole history of what they call humanity was nothing but the doggone junior high school level. The junior high school level. A caterpillar goes into a cocoon to become what? A butterfly. The earthling of this particular existence was the cocoon stage. We're talking about the metamorphosis. You will have a picture. Y'all all right? I want to give you one thing here. First of all, you will have a picture. See if I can find one of these. Find one of these for you. You know what the scarab is, which is the beetle. You see the scarab, which is the beetle on my neck. The scarab and the beetle, the dung beetle, is representative